13 years ago, singer John Mellencamp had the idea of turning a story he had heard into a play. The story involved the ghost of two feuding brothers, so he called the best ghostwriter he could ever find, Stephen King. Then T Bone Burnett was brought in as the musical director. Together, they created Ghost Brothers of Darkland County. It is a supernatural, Southern Gothic musical. Here is a teaser for the production.
Tragic news from Lake Belle Reve, where it looks like a bad accident has occurred onto a double suicide.
Showed up at the wrong time. I've been kept outside. Never could get in at all, even when I tried.
Really, we're all doing this because we want to.
Yeah, that's true.
We're all really just doing it because we want to.
Gentlemen, John Mellencamp, Stephen King, and T Bone Burnett. I am pleased to have them all. So let me just review how this happened. You had this story.
It wasn't a story. It's an actual thing that happened. I bought you've seen my two boys.
Yeah, of course.
Well, they were little ones.
Yeah.
And I bought this place, and after I bought it, this cabin out on this lake, the people said, "Oh, by the way, it's haunted." And I went, "Yeah, sure thing." So anyway, we fixed it up, and they gave me some, detective magazines from the 30s and the 40s, an account of what had happened in this cabin. I looked at them, I read them, so we went in and fixed it up, and then we stayed there. Yeah. And it was just like, this place is creepy, this place is haunted. And what happened is that two brothers back in the 30s had taken a girl there, gotten into an argument over the girl. They were drunk, of course. They were 19 and 20. And one brother hit the other brother over the head with a poker and killed him. But they didn't know that they'd killed him, so they tried to drag him outside and take him into town. And, of course, in the 30s, you know what the gravel roads were like and the big cars. And the two kids were driving real fast, and they had a wreck and went into the lake and drowned. So that evening, 3 kids drowned, and it all started in the cabin. And when they went back to get the kid that was dead in the front yard, some animal had chewed off his head. Oh, so that's the story I told Steve. I said, "Kim."
Made you light up, didn't it?
I tell you what, that's like Big Pappy getting a fastball in his wheelhouse.
That's exactly right. Right down the middle.
That's it.
So when did you go from knowing this story to something started churning around in your mind?
Well, it actually wasn't even my idea. At the time, people were talking to me about doing a musical with all my old songs, with the hits that I'd had, and I just wasn't interested in doing it. Yeah. And I was talking to an agent. And this story, I just happened to tell him. I said, "You can't believe what happened. I bought this place, and I was telling him about it." And he said, "Now that would make a great story." And I said, "Yeah, if you could get Steve King to write it." He said, "I'm Steve King's agent." And I said, "Well, call Steve and see if he'd be interested." Yeah. And he was interested enough to take a meeting, and I flew down to Florida, and
there you go. So your reaction was, "Let's do it," or did they say something to you that said, "Oh yeah"?
Well, you know what? The guy that we're talking about, the agent, called me up and said, "John Mellencamp has an idea for a musical," and my reaction to that was zero. Flat line, right. Because a lot of people have a lot of ideas, and they think, well, Stephen King would be perfect for this project. Right. And he said, John would actually come down and talk to you, because John was in South Carolina, which is just a hop. Right. And I said to my wife, "What do you think about this?" And she said, "His music reminds me of your stories. Why don't you go ahead and have a meeting with him?" And my wife never says stuff like that. So John came, he told me the story, and immediately the dial started to turn up. And also at the same time that he was telling me the story, he was tuning my guitar, which I hadn't been able to tune for about 5 years, and that impressed me. And I thought, well, at least I could keep him around for a while as a roadie.
Exactly.
But he told me the story, and we clicked on some level where I'm thinking, this is a straight-ahead guy, and maybe there's something here. And I said, well, you know what? give me some time and I'll do a little treatment and we'll see if we can go anywhere. He had the story about the kids who had died in the cabin, and my reaction was, well, if you did this as a play, wouldn't it be a great visual if they were ghosts and the audience could see them, but the people who came to the cabin for some reason, the way John did with his kids, could not. And so I started to play around with that.
Yeah. Now, so what do we have, a play here? We're thinking play.
No, we're thinking musical.
We're thinking musical.
We're thinking musical. So Steve says to me, we have, we open and close the whole deal in that one conversation. Steve drove me back to the airport, and he says, so if we do this, what's the business deal on this thing? And I said, 50-50 all the way.
Yeah.
We shook hands, and that's been the deal the whole since.
But responsibility, he's going to write the story.
He's going to write
You're
the story.
going to write the lyrics and the music?
Yes, and we don't have any, but we don't have any idea what we're doing. Charlie, these three guys right here are like three guys down in the basement building our first soapbox. And it'd be like, Steve, does that break really? Do you think that? How do those wheels go on? Because he's never done a musical. I've never done. The only one that had any sense in her head at all was Burnett.
Well, how'd you get him in there? Because you knew you needed what?
Well,
a lot. Huh?
It had been 10 years, and Steve and I were starting to go.
Oh yeah.
Okay, 10 years. This.
We need somebody.
He said T Bone Burnett, and I lit right up because I'm thinking, here's a guy who knows music and knows how music goes in drama.
Yeah, exactly right.
Right.
Yeah. And so they call you.
That's it.
And what do you do?
Well, I listened to a whole group of one great song after another, because John had been writing music for 10 years for this show, and I get a lot of tapes of songwriters, of collections of their material, but it's always over a short period of time, months or maybe a year or two. John, who's one of our very best songwriters, has been writing songs for 10 years, so there were 20 some odd really killer songs. The challenge really was to find out which were the core songs, which were the ones that moved everything.
Do you do that by asking him?
No, you do it by, how do you do that? I don't know. It's touch. It's like you were talking to Graham McDowell about how do you hit a chip shot, pitch shot over a bunker. It's just feel. But also, it was a great. It's a conjuring trick as well, because you have to conjure a swamp, and you have to conjure Lake Belle Reve, and you conjure a ghost story. Ghost music. The challenge was to create a tone that would invigorate this ghost story.
Okay, but I still don't know what a musical director does.
Yeah, it's all, it's what I did. I arranged the tunes, found the singers to come sing them. I always try to make singers sing very conversationally if I can. I love Sinatra. I love listening to Sinatra sing like in the wee small hours of the morning. You feel like a guy's just sitting there telling telling it to you. That's what I do. I just try to make sure people tell the story.
And so once you got rolling.
Well, Steve and I were kind of looking at each other going, okay, we've been doing this for 10 years, and, are we going to continue with this, and should we continue with it? And
but you're both doing other things, too.
Oh, yeah, sure, yeah. That's what took 10 years, is that I'd be on tour, and I'd have a record out. He'd what'd you write, like 250 books during this time period?
I think it was 300, John.
300, exactly.
And with John, it was actually 350 records.
Yeah, I made a bunch of albums, did a bunch of shows. And so what would happen is that, a few weeks, a few months would go by, and I'd call up Steve, and I'd go, Steve, what are we doing with Ghost Brothers? And he'd say, well, I got these 2 new songs. Can you write a song like this? Can you write a song like that? And then we would just discuss it, and then we'd go on about our day. But when T Bone was brought in, he kind of just went like this, just everything gelled.
So there you go. You had your guy who was happening. From the minds of co-conspirators Stephen King, John Mellencamp, and T Bone Burnett comes Ghost Brothers of Darkland County, Southern Gothic supernatural musical thriller of fraternal love, lust, jealousy, and revenge. This has got everything you need, doesn't it?
It does. Actually, we decided we were going to set it in Mississippi on a lake, and we called it Lake Belle Reve because there's a Belle Reve in Tennessee Williams, and we both wanted to kind of strike for that vibe, the Tennessee Williams thing, Streetcar Named Desire, and we wanted to do that family thing that Williams was so great at, but we wanted to add that Gothic element. And I can remember John and I write these things, and I'd say, well, I think a song ought to go here, and it ought to be about brothers who were arguing. And John would write that song. And there was one time we got together in Boston, and I went to where John's hotel was, and he said, Steve, I got this great song called Tear This Cabin Down. And I think that it probably ought to belong to Dan Coker, the caretaker, who's also dead, and he's also a ghost. And John had his guitar, and he played some of it for it, and I got very, very excited. And that was one case where John had this song and said, I really think this ought to be in the show. And I said, yeah, we're going to put it right up front, which we did. And eventually we changed it, didn't we? I mean, it ends up ending Act One. Yeah. And it was a certain way. This is the evolution of the project. John said, well, I got somebody who can play killer slide guitar, and, you know, we'll do it that way. And then we did it a different way in some of the demos, and then T Bone Burnett came along, and on the record, it's Taj Mahal who does it, and it's got a real swampy, mysterious quality. So you see the whole thing develop. But my point is, T Bone in some ways put this project really back on rails after about 10 years, because John and I had kind of gotten to a point where we were kind of like, you know, we had battle fatigue almost. Yeah. We couldn't see the way forward, and T-Bone was fresh eyes and fresh ears, and he really kind of broke it open.
But then look at this. Elvis Costello, Taj Mahal, you mentioned, Sheryl Crow, Roseanne Cash, Chris Christopherson. You know,
all great songwriters, by the way. Who are very happy to sing John Mellencamp songs.
Really?
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing.
So they all said, "I'm on. I'm in."
They did. Yeah. Well, you know, it was, the material is undeniable. So, and you know, to have a songwriter like Chris Christopherson sing a country song for you is
he's going back to his roots.
Well, it's going back to you know, it's just a thrill. It's a great honor, really, to have Chris.
Because you know,
us.
When T-Bone would talk to these people, it'd be like, all these guys have written better songs than me. All these guys can write songs better than me. What are they going to listen to my song and go, well, you know, if the song was a little better. We like Steve's story, but Mellencamp's song, I don't know.
But it didn't happen.
No, it didn't.
They loved it.
Everybody that we asked to be on it was on it.
In all honesty, I think these are the best songs that John has ever written. And one of the truisms about theater is that if you can send the audience out humming one of the songs from that show, you've got a hit on your hands. And with this one, you have to pick which one you want to hum on the way out, because they're all pretty tasty.
And Meg Ryan's in this?
Yeah.
That must have been a hard get.
Yeah, I know her.
Yes.
And I like her. You know, she doesn't like me much, but
well, I understand that.
You know me too, Charlie. So Charlie has the same distaste for me that most people do.
I do not. You know?
Did you meet Meg as a consequence of Ghost Brothers?
Is that right?
Yeah, I met her because I was talking to her about being on this record.
Tell me about the location of Belle Reve. I mean, you talked a little bit about it in terms of...
Well, I knew a little bit about Mississippi because I'd worked on a book that had called 11/22/63, and it was around the time of the civil rights stuff. And I went down there, and I was just fascinated by how much it was like Maine, which is where I'm from. And one of the reasons that John and I get along is that we're both basically Hicks. Yeah. I don't mind saying that right out. And went down there to Mississippi and looked around, and I'm thinking, I love Tennessee Williams, crazy about Faulkner. I love the talk, I love the cadence, I love the small town vibe where everybody knows everybody, and you know, the town looks peaceful, and you've got the water tower with some girl's name painted on it, but everybody's got a secret. Everybody's got a skeleton in the closet, that old Rose for Emily thing that Faulkner wrote about. So I'm thinking, this has got to be the place. And John also loves that Tennessee Williams stuff.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we really, I mean, and we thought to ourselves, what have we really got to lose? Okay, he's from Indiana, I'm from Maine, and Mississippi isn't our home place, but at the same time, it is the home of the Southern Gothic, which seemed right. And if we were going to go into a project that neither one of us knew anything about to start with, he'd never written a musical, and I'd never written a play.
So is that why you said we're risking our neck on this?
Well, we're not. It's not like we're going to parachute into Afghanistan and get shot up.
No,
but the thing is,
yeah, and it's not that if it fails, you're going to be
he's, you know,
homeless.
I'm
You're not
going to
be
be
homeless, are you?
I'm going to be 66. I'm going to be 66 this fall, and John's going to be 45 pretty soon.
I heard
and
that.
we don't have anything to lose at this point.
Exactly.
The only thing that we could do is he could stick in his rut and I could stick in mine, and this was something that was creatively
And T Bone
exciting.
can always find a job.
That's right.
Well, Charlie, here's the thing too. Here's the real success of Ghost Brothers.
Yeah.
Is that Steve and I have become. He's like my big brother.
Right.
And long after Ghost Brothers is over, him and I are going to be friends. And it's very unusual that you make a friend inside the entertainment business. That's a real friend. And I've made a real friend with him. And the same goes with Henry. Henry and I have, we just met and we clicked, and he's produced my best records. And so it's really nice, easy work to have to come and be with these two guys, because they're two guys that I can honestly say, and I think they'll all say the same thing, that it's just like going to some guy's house that you're a friend with and let's make something up. Yeah. It's not like a job, you know. Now, I've had stuff, and I'm sure that you've had stuff. We've all had stuff. It's like, Jesus Christ, we got to go over there. Oh, God, I don't want to go. But with these two guys, it's always like, you know, like Meg said to me the other day, I said, oh, we're going to do all these. She goes, how bad can it be? You're going to be with Steve and T Bone. So,
no, it's a pull, but we obviously doing a lot of PR for the record. It's what you have to do. I've done a lot of it before. This is better because I'm with my friends. You know, we all pull it together.
Talking.
Yeah.
Hanging out and talking.
yeah.
So what do you want it to become? What's the idea?
Well, I can say what I want it to become is a hologram, because we haven't gotten a hologram.
A hologram.
We have, there's
a hologram.
A hologram,
right.
Yes, hologram.
Right.
That's it.
He's from Texas.
But you and I aren't Hicks. We may be from North Carolina and Texas. But we don't mind the Hicks, right?
Yeah, no.
You better not.
No,
I grew up as one.
Yes, exactly. These cats started out on this journey without an end point. It's a very like they were Lewis and Clark. They were going exploring, and they didn't come to me saying we want to take this to here or we want this to end up in a certain place. It's all like, what do we got? What are we doing? What do we make? What are we inventing? So
and like it had a life of its own.
It does. It absolutely does, and that's why I say like this kind of story. I'm very interested in holography and all the things that are coming with that, and this kind of story with ghosts and real people and whatnot could be a really extraordinary, immersive experience. So that's what I'm looking at. I know I'm probably wrong, but I think that would be an interesting place.
Third time you two have worked together, right?
I don't know. I talk to him every day, so it's hard to keep track.
Right. Do you really talk to him almost every day?
We talk, all the time.
Yeah.
You and T-Bone worked on a record that was all acoustic instruments, wasn't it? It sounds like those Sun recordings from the 50s.
Yeah, we made a record.
That was a wonderful record.
That
was a wonderful record.
Yeah.
And, I think that Ghost Brothers had some input in that because we were dealing with all these acoustic sounds, and you went into the studio and you made this record that sounded like Carl Perkins from the 50s. I loved that. I did. But when we talked about this project to begin with, John and I, before T-Bone came on board, we talked about Broadway, we talked about rep, we talked about the kind of show that could be put on for community theater. We didn't have one particular goal in mind.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, they've talked about black box. Yeah, so I don't know. It is evolving. It does have a life of its own. The songs keep coming. The story keeps evolving. So
we start in October, and we have like 20 shows. And we're doing, mostly, when you have a musical, they'll come and they'll set up for like 3 or 4 days, 5 days, and do the musical, and then they'll move on. But we're doing it like a rock show, you know. It's one night here, one night there, one night here, one night here, and so this thing has been leading us around by the nose for quite some time, and it still is. So we'll see what happens with these 20 shows, and then we'll go from there.
So, you know, they have that Hadacol show. They used to have those medicine
Hadacol,
shows.
I remember Hadacol.
Remember the Hadacol show? Milton Berle and Hank Williams.
Exactly.
Maybe it's a little bit of that, too. You
Sponsored
know?
by Hadacol.
That's right. Some bogus remedy.
Exactly. Are you still painting?
Yeah.
Frequently?
Sure. Yeah, I paint all the time. Yeah. It's that and smoking are my two favorite things to do.
I know. How's your health?
My health is good.
Great.
You know, I should, you know,
wherever.
You know, from my lips to God's ear, but right now it seems to be fairly good. And John paints, and when I'm not writing, I'll pick up the guitar and plug in and play with my grandsons because they play a little rock and roll, and they'll let me sit in as long as I don't get too loud.
So really, what we're saying is T-Bone is the only employable one of the bunch. Because Steve and I don't play well with others, and so it's best that we just kind of keep, you know, on our little cells.
I think the phone keeps ringing for him too, don't you?
Yeah, I know it does.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Great
much.
to see
Thank you.
Thank you. John Mellencamp, Stephen King, T Bone Burnett, Ghost Brothers of Darkland County. Back in a moment. Stay with us.